but we didn't want anybody to know we were doing a mid-engine Corvette.
Uh-huh.
So it ended up, all the exterior panels, it looked like a Holden Ute. Looked
Okay.
like, you know, the Australian El
Okay.
Camino.
Yeah.
And since it was a mid-engine car, we needed air induction coming out. It had a tonneau cover on it. But we built a stationary spoiler on the back, and the upright for the spoilers were the induction for the engine, so we kind
Really?
of disguised it
Wow.
that way. So
Wow.
You gotta understand, these guys.
That's
like,
so creative.
Hey, welcome to Car Guy Confessions, brought to you by ARP. I'm Jeff Smith. This is my car buddy Cam Benty and car builder Steve Strope, and we're going to tell you some stories.
All right, so in the magic of video, we're back. Al Butland is our special guest star here, and Will, you need to do the preface here because you've known Al for how long?
Well,
a long time, right?
Well, let me back up. So I worked in the magazine business for 10 years
Yep,
with you
yep.
in the 90s, and then I left to go complete my dream to work in the car business and worked 23 plus years at GM.
Okay.
And I met great people like Al Butland
Uh-huh.
that nobody knows.
Right.
And so when we were talking about this, so, you know, we're out here with Al and another guy, and you'll meet Mario in a minute here, but one of the things that has always been sad for me is I met people at GM that did incredible things, but they did it under incredibly high secrecy.
Yeah.
And the company doesn't document a lot of that stuff and share it. And so people just don't know where these great acts come from.
Mm-hmm.
And we've documented hot rodders all our lives.
Right.
And
that was our job. Yeah.
Yes. And so when we had the opportunity, Al's retired from GM.
Yeah,
and
7 years now.
Seven years
Nice
now.
like that.
He's still doing great things. And so we'll talk a little bit about that too.
Okay.
But Al worked in most of his career, and you can correct me, but where I met you was in the Advanced Vehicle Integration shop, which was the shop that was really, for me, it was like a dream come true. And I'll just tell you, I didn't have a pass to get in there. It was so secret. And so I would sneak through the door. I would tailgate through the door. Or I met a guy who was a fabricator, Jim Cobalt, who was an incredible technician and fabricator.
And he could have let you in?
And I would
the
call,
secret nod?
Jim had actually a cabled phone, on his desk.
Okay.
And I knew the number. And I would call that, and he would answer it. I'd be like, Jim, can you let me in? He's like, who is this? Why are you calling me? And so I would get in there to see what they were doing because they built pre-production, again, correct me if I'm wrong, they built pre-production cars that were supposed to be like what the production car would be like, but it was for executives to drive or early engineering studies and things like that.
So they got an idea what the car was going to be like.
Some people would call them mules or other things like that.
Proof of concept.
Proof of concept, there you go. POCs, proof of concept cars. And so they built really cool stuff. And they didn't build it like a movie car or a hot rod. They would build tooling to stamp sheet metal, and they would put it together like a production car.
So when you got finished with it, it looked like the production car?
More importantly, it functioned. Like
That was the big
Okay.
thing, is
Yeah,
they needed
yeah.
to replicate, so when people were looking at them, they would know, this is how a production car is going to react.
Right.
Yeah, they were fully engineered, designed, complete, and we do the analysis work. And one of the things we did with those proof of concept vehicles is we would build them to function exactly like the design is going to be.
Okay.
So that the analysis guys could start doing analysis work to get rid of hardware.
Okay.
And tell you the truth, they don't build the proof of concept vehicles anymore.
That's exactly right. So that's the other thing is they talk about they want to do virtual.
Yeah.
And so,
But that comes at a cost, right?
Well, it's an investment. It's an investment
Right.
in what it's an investment in. It is in increasing the industry's knowledge base, right?
make sure you're talking to the microphone so they can hear you. 'cause this is
improving
really
the
important.
industry.
So, but the
it's
stuff
really
that
good.
you're building is to prove that their design would really work. It might need
Their
some tweaking
concept.
in their concept. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So today, what they'll talk about is they've got all these models, right? They got virtual models, and you've got the model and the physical, right? And so what you want to do is you want to get those to correlate.
Right.
But there's this point where things are kind of going along and the model doesn't correlate. Well, they would build these so that they could do the correlation
Yeah.
to get better at it.
So what would be the most interesting one that you built?
Oh, well, I was there
It's
for over 40 years.
40 years.
It's
so
like
there's a
saying
ton.
which is your
Which is your
child?
favorite kid, right?
I'll give you
so-
a couple examples. So they did a vehicle called the code name Blackjack. So why don't you talk about Blackjack?
Blackjack, well, that was the predecessor to the C8.
And
So
this was
we did that in around 14.
2014.
Yeah, 2013, 2014, if I recall correctly. Yeah.
And so it was a mid-engine Corvette.
Right. Before there was any production mid-engine Corvette,
Yeah,
obviously.
and then, you know, and that, when you take a look at that vehicle, if you've seen cutaways of that vehicle, a lot of it are large castings. Similar to the Ford GT and things like that.
Right.
Well, we weren't gonna go and do investment castings or any of that yet, so we would take literally 3 foot by 2 foot by 3 foot chunks of billet and CNC machine.
whittle it
cast
out.
and, yeah.
Wow.
So they have these machines in the AVI shop that literally, when it's hogging that out, the floor is shaking. I
Really?
mean, the whole building is
Wow.
basically shaking because that thing's digging so hard. And so they would make a lot of chips.
Yeah.
But, you know, they had the math data, they had the computer simulation of what that part was, and they could tell the machine, yeah, just cut everything away that's not a
Yeah.
one
Wow.
suspension piece or a chassis
Yeah.
piece.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
And so, again, I'll keep talking, that was built inside the AVI shop, but they built a room inside the shop.
Yeah, a room in
That
a
was-
room
that
in
was
a
a
room.
room.
The super secret room.
And I never got in that room. When that car was being built, nobody would take me in there because they were
There
scared.
were only like about a half a dozen keys to get in that shop.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow.
And so they built that room just specifically for that. They used it for other things after that, but that was the big purpose.
And then didn't you tell me that it was like you disguised the car after it got running?
The underpinnings of the vehicle, we know it was gonna function correctly. We still had to do weight distribution and everything like the production intent vehicle is going to be. But we didn't want anybody to know we were doing a mid-engine Corvette. So it ended up, all the exterior panels, it looked like a Holden Ute. Looked like
Okay.
the Australian El Camino.
Yeah.
And since it was a mid-engine car, we needed air induction coming out. It had a tonneau cover on it. But we built a stationary spoiler on the back, and the upright for the spoilers were the induction for the engine, so we kind
Really?
of disguised it
Wow.
that way. So it was-
Wow.
you gotta understand, these guys,
That's
like,
so creative.
they would do crazy stuff. They did,
Yeah.
so all the early autonomous vehicles were built there.
Oh,
Ford-
yeah.
Really?
Oh, yeah. All the first
Wow.
autonomous vehicles, all the first EVs. Some of the experiment vehicles that weren't kind of like high volume production, that were basically development vehicles, we did fuel cell vehicles.
Okay.
So we did a fleet of about 220 Chevrolet Equinox vehicles that had over 3 million miles on that fleet. It was a lease fleet. Most of them were in the California area.
Okay.
And so we did a lot of fuel cell development work. We did things for the military. We would do fuel cell vehicles for the military, all kinds of.
They did some fun stuff. They did the Hot Rod Solstice too, the 427.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
For a little while there, we were doing fully functional, PR type of properties.
Yeah. Yeah.
The guys worked on Project 57.
It's Project X,
did the
yeah.
Project X,
Yeah,
the yellow
one of the
57.
iterations of
Yeah,
Project
yeah,
X.
57.
Yeah.
We did the Hot Rod Solstice that Will was referring
Okay.
to was
All right. And that had a 427 in it?
Yeah.
Wow.
LS.
Wow.
630 horse, and it would run mid-10s with that car.
Wow.
They did, I remember you did the first independent rear suspension Suburbans and Escalades. They hogged out the big, suspension
Really?
components and the
Really?
CNC again.
Yeah. Yeah, we did, another experimental vehicle was what we call the lightweight Suburban. Took 700 pounds out of a Suburban,
Really?
still fully functional. And,
Wow.
It was actually really cool. I remember that. That
And
car.
how much did those things weigh before you took the weight out of them?
they're about 6,000 pounds or
So
so.
you get it down to almost 5,000.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
significant.
That was really cool.
Yeah.
That's
It
15.
had like a ladder frame, didn't it? Wasn't it like
It
a
did,
ladder
it was
frame?
it was basically a press brake stamp steel
Okay.
frame. It had basically 2 longitudinal frame rails per side, split by a shear panel.
Okay.
And
Wow. So just as strong, but yet significantly
Stronger.
lighter. Stronger.
stronger.
Stronger and lighter.
Yeah.
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 They
That's,
built
that's
the-
hard to achieve.
They built the first 2 Volt, 2-mode hybrid
Yeah.
deals, and it was on. They were on like cruises, wasn't it? Cruises or Malibu?
They were in the cruise.
Yeah, they were on the cruise. On the outside, they looked
No,
like
no, I'm sorry. They were in Malibus because we used to call them Malivolts.
Malibus.
Yeah. So outside they look like just a Malibu. But
Right,
they built,
right.
And I remember the sheet metal that they put in there for the floor pans and everything was like the production level sheet
Really?
metal.
Wow.
They would build
Yeah.
like tools and press the
We
metal.
would do about EV vehicles. We were doing a brake regen study.
Okay.
So we had, I can't remember what base vehicle it was, but we had this large battery at the back of the vehicle. And so we're going to try to dump as much energy back into that battery as we possibly can. So the question was, okay, what if we blow up the battery? You know, that was real. So here I was, I didn't know anybody on the West Coast, but I knew they made trans blankets and scatter shield blankets.
Okay.
So I call them up. Who answers the phone? Jim. Jim answers the phone.
Jim Dees.
Yeah. And he's talking to me for about an hour about all kinds of crazy stuff. And then blowing a hole, he builds this big explosion-proof blanket for me and stuff. Yeah.
That's great.
It was
That's
amazing.
great. That's cool. Yeah.
You know, Al, I know you did some crazy stuff that I frankly didn't understand what you were doing, but I remember watching you work on like a valve train. It was like I won't say it was like Desmodromic, but it seemed like it was mechanically actuated. Can you talk about some of the other crazier stuff?
Oh, well, early on in my career, before I came to GM, through high school, I worked for a fellow by the name of Bill King, which is the race engine shop. He used to work at Chevy R&D.
Okay.
He was one of the engine builders for the Can-Am stuff that Chevy was supporting. And then we did a lot of Formula 5000 engines. So I was working there as a machinist, doing a lot of machine work there. Then I also did design work at one of the production shops around town for Ford assembly line stuff.
Okay.
So I was always interested in all that. And I end up getting the job out of Milford in the development area.
Okay.
2 or 3 years later, I get my dream job at the tech center in the old Chevy R&D group.
Okay.
And at that time, Chevy Engineering, there was no powertrain division. Each division had their own powertrain area. So we did a lot of experimental engine works then. You know, we did there was in '83 we did a vehicle called the I'm sorry, I can't remember what it was. It was an aero car. It was 0.14 CD.
Whoa!
And it had
0.14.
it had a transverse V6 60-degree engine in the front of it. We reduced the overall height of that engine by 7 inches.
Really?
And we ran the intake runners between the rocker arms. So it was like you saw rocker covers, but then you saw all the runners go, you know. So that was fun.
Wow.
Yeah, and then we did some, before the LS stuff came out, Powertrain was looking at doing what we called the Gen 2 short case.
Okay.
Which took a couple inches out of from front face of case to rear face of case.
Wow.
2 inches out of
2 inches?
Yeah. And we were doing what else did we do? We did we did these slider plate valves on the intake runners.
Okay, as opposed to a poppet valve, it's a slider
we
valve.
did sliders.
Okay.
And so they had little, stepper motors inside the valley. So they had
electrically operated?
Yeah, electrically operated.
Wow, stepper motors.
So one of the things that always impressed me about Al is a lot of the time they would come with like a concept, but that somehow the AVI shop had to figure out how to actually mechanically make it happen.
Make it work, yeah.
And I would find Al, he can do mechanical drawings, he would be sketching something out or kind of mocking something up or whatever. And deep in thought, of course, I would interrupt him because I was just fascinated by it. But can you remember any of those times when you'd be, given like, hey, can you guys do this? And you would kind of be tasked with figuring out how to make it happen?
Oh.
So let me back up a
I'm
minute.
getting old and I'm blanking out.
So Al is a little nervous because he wants to make sure he almost didn't come out here because he wants to make sure he honors GM and doesn't spill the beans on anything. I said, just talk about what you've done.
Yeah.
And so and he's also really humble, but I'm trying to think of some of the things I walked up to you on where you were doing that, but a lot of it was, what is it?
Well, tailgate?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was a period. It was interesting that there was a period at GM where the buzzword was innovation.
Okay.
Right. So everybody's group was trying to innovate things and do things, and we had a group of basically volunteers that we meet once a week for an hour, and we throw stuff on the table or on the wall, see if it's stuck, and this, that, and the other thing. And there was an idea saying, hey, can we get rid of the rear tailgate? Can we make it slide under the vehicle for a pickup?
Like
And
the old 70s station wagons.
yeah,
Right,
yeah,
right.
the old
Tailgate
car
just
wagons.
disappeared.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So Jim Gobart was doodling some things going on, and I came up to him, I go, look at that. I go, he goes, I can't get on there because we're gonna just rip up the frame, it's not gonna slide. I said, well, why don't we take it down and then fold it one more time? So it drops. And then-
It falls down twice.
yeah,
Yeah.
so to speak, right?
Yeah.
You put a hinge, so the hinge is behind the bumper.
Uh-huh.
And I said, that'll at least get a foot, you get in there at least a foot deeper. And then Jim goes, yeah, then we could fold it again and become a step. And we go, that's it.
And see, this is one of the beauties of, so the AVI shop internally was considered what they call a cobble shop. And so a lot of.
Which is a word I really.
I know, I knew he was gonna get up on it, so the guys that worked there did
yeah.
not like it, but, you know, design was really supposed to be the people that came up with the things that are user-centered, customer-centric and everything, and engineering was supposed to work off of prints, you know, X and Y and XYZ axis and all this other stuff. But the AVI shop was really the bridge between the two.
Okay.
Because they would come up with a lot of crazy stuff, but they had no way to figure out how to make it work.
How to make it work.
Engineering needed like plans to do it.
Yeah.
And so what he's talking about, that collaboration, that kind of yes and where they're
Yeah.
walking through things, was really what happened there. It was one of the things I really was attracted to.
Yeah.
So keep
Yeah.
going. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
well, when you say, so here's the thing, when it comes to levels of design in fabrication, there's the quick churn where you make a quick little mock-up so you could say,
Yes. You cobble it together, yes.
Exactly, you say
Yes.
this is how it works.
Yes.
But, and you need to know when to apply what.
Right.
For example, when we did proof of concept vehicles, those designs were built in the CAD tube, 100%. Not just that, okay, does everything fit together?
Yes, it's
That
a
was-
3D model.
That
Yeah,
was
yep.
Yeah.
But what was the center of gravity? We
Oh.
mass tracked
Wow.
down the Suburban I was telling you about.
Yeah.
We tracked the mass on that. When it was built, we were within 4 pounds of the actual, of our estimate what it was gonna be, was within 4 pounds of the actual build.
The actual deal.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, incredibly talented people. That's what I'm saying. Like, this is not like, I know they call their cobble shop, but the cool thing about it was it allowed for them to be innovative within the framework
Sure.
of what
Oh,
they
yeah.
were challenged
Yeah.
with. So,
Yeah.
so that's really what that
And that's the key to the whole thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really is.
The key is to know what, you're not gonna measure a 2x4 with a micrometer to cut it off, right?
Right.
But sometimes you need to measure that tight, so.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great.
It really was. Go ahead.
So we've got another friend that we want to bring
Yep,
in here,
yep.
right, to do this. So thank you for coming here and tell.
It was a blast.
Let's tell your story.
Thanks so
right?
much.
And so we're going to do another magic here and flip it once again.
Hey, we'd like to thank our sponsor, ARP-bolts.com. We got a fantastic little backdrop here. They make an outstanding series of bolts, almost anything you would need for engines, chassis, things like that. In fact, we were at lunch today, and a guy asked you about the bolt on the back of your shirt, and and I said, well, it's really about a head bolt. They neck the stem down of the bolt on a short, small block Chevy head bolt, so the clamp load is even across 3 different head bolt lengths on a small block Chevy. And, so that's the kind of technology that you get out of ARP. And we've all got stories on all that stuff.
Well, for a translation of what he said, call arpbolts.com.
But the message is that you can't get any better than that.
No, you cannot.
There you go. We'd like to thank our friends at inthegaragemedia.com. They have 3 fantastic magazines. They've got Classic Truck Performance, they have Modern Rotting, and my favorite, All Chevy Performance with Nick, my buddy Nick,
Oh, you're
is
so
the editor.
biased.
So yes, of course. But it's a fantastic book. They're doing print media, which
Yes.
is of course our favorite. So
Tangible
color and
magazine.
everything.
in color and everything, and you can get your car on the cover of one of those books, which is
Right.
a fun
that's a
deal.
lot.
Great
yeah.
tech.
Great
written
tech.
by
You know,
and others
not always
that are
written by me, but
famous
yeah.
people.
Yeah.
Famous people
Not
have written all the
always
tech.
written by me.
That's right.
Just
So
pick it
check
up and
them
read
out
it.
at
Yes.
inthegaragemedia.com, and they're our friends, and they will thank you.
Due to the magic of video, we're back now with another guest star, right? So Mario Ando, thanks for stopping by, and
Thanks for
so
having
we
me.
get to tell the same kind of stories here from a different perspective, all the stuff that you did, because this is great stuff.
Let me
right?
set this up a little
Okay,
bit.
please.
So once again, so Mario is in, again, the Advanced Vehicle
AVI.
Integration Shop.
Right.
And there was a bunch of guys in there that were kind of the old dogs, right? When I first started hanging out there. And Mario was kind of in between. He wasn't a young gun, but he definitely wasn't one of the old dogs that were in there. But he was just a consistent guy that would just be cranking out. You know, he could weld, he can, technical stuff. He could work on engines and transmissions. And he just is in the middle of everything, right? And I
And a Mopar guy.
Yeah, and a Mopar guy. We won't hold that against you. And so
Appreciate it.
I'm here for you. And so yeah, right. And so there was a couple projects we kind of ran across each other. But the thing that if you have a truck that has the Multipro tailgate on it, which is that Swiss Army knife tailgate that comes on all the GM trucks now.
Yep.
So I thought Mario was on the patent, but he's not. But you were heavily involved in the whole thing. And our mutual friend, who's no longer with us, Jim Gobart, was a key player. And then Al Butlin, who was just with us, they are on the patent. I wish you were, because you deserve to be. But that tailgate kind of showed everything about that whole organization and what they did. So take it from there, Mario, of how that came about, like back up all the way into the contest and everything, okay?
Okay, so basically, when you were speaking with Al earlier, he was more on the engineering side of a lot of that stuff. Him and Jim worked out a lot of the details of how to fold the tailgate, the bracketry, the hinges and whatnot. I participated more on a build side of the tailgate and made some components for it, and that's, I guess, part of the reason I wasn't in on the patent was because I wasn't really that involved in the engineering. I was more involved in the build of the components. But I did get pretty involved throughout the entire process. So there were actually two versions of that gate, right? The very first version of that tailgate, I believe we started this in I want to say around 2011.
Okay.
We built, and again, Al told the story about how it came about in those meetings, which I was also a part of that as well. The very first version of that gate was just
Now wait a minute, you have to say this. They pitted the technicians against the engineers
So that
in
came
the
later.
innovation. Oh, I thought this was the beginning.
No, I was part of the team that
Okay.
would get together. I think it was bi-weekly or something like that, and we'd kind of put ideas together. Yeah, the competition I think you're alluding to was something that came a little bit after the tailgate, right?
Yep.
So the first version of the gate folded in half, and we made a little video. It folded in half, and then it had the step. We made a video that sent out to some of the groups that were interested, the truck groups, right? And I was the subject that walked up and down
I've seen the
back
video.
of the
It's
tailgate,
hilarious, by the way.
carrying like a toolbox. And Jim, who's a really dear friend of mine, as I'm walking in and out of the tailgate, they wanted to show how
It was real. Yeah, it was
robust it
real,
was. I would step on the tailgate, and he goes, "Look, even a heavyweight can jump up in and out of this thing, and it doesn't have any problems." Right?
This was totally unscripted and classic Jim Gobart, by the way.
absolutely.
Just totally
That's kinda how
deadpan this thing
shop
all the
went,
way.
right? You would get along. So that video, they sent it out to the truck groups, and it didn't just go to them, it went across the board, and it went by everybody who I bumped into from time to time. "Hey, we saw the video, it was really cool," It's kind of neat, they got a kick out of it, Jim making fun of me.
Yeah.
So what really ended up happening was the Colorado Canyon truck group had interest in it first. They were actually in the process of doing that truck, that second version of that truck. They were interested in it. They wanted to do something with it. Well, when the full-size truck got wind of that, they went, wait a minute.
Which they're the big dogs, right?
Yeah,
They make the
exactly.
money,
They're the
they
ones that
get
make
all
the money.
the cool stuff.
We're
up front.
interested in it. We'll talk about, maybe you can get your hands on it later. But they wanted to put a little different twist on it, and so they wanted a different version of it, and that's how it's got that U shape in it. That was some of the stuff they were interested in.
And that's so
They
the
did-
stock hinges can,
Right.
and stock latches can work on it, right?
Yeah, they weren't 100% behind the way we had it hinged and the latches and stuff like that. And they knew that the stuff they had in production already was good enough to make it.
Yeah.
And for durability. And
Right.
So then they took basically over that program. We kind of transferred them all the information and all the data and kind of ran with it. Well, then the word starts getting around that this small group of engineers, designers, and technicians at our AVI shop are doing these innovative projects, the rest of the company wanted to get involved in that kind of thing.
Right.
So that's when they had this competition. And they put groups of people together from design staff, from Milford Proving Grounds, engineers and designers, from our group, our building,
The AVI group,
and
yeah.
over at the VEC Tower, there were 5
Vehicle
groups.
Engineering Center.
Okay.
Yeah,
VEC.
so there were
Yeah.
5 groups of engineers, designers, and technicians got together in a room, and they wanted to come up with more innovations, basically to put in truck.
Mm-hmm.
And so this became kind of a,
Internal competition.
competition.
Yeah,
between-
yeah.
And everybody wanted to have the rights of winning this championship
Sure.
or whatever. And so everybody had to come up with some different ideas, and we came up with 4 or 5 different ideas. All the teams came up with 4 or 5 different ideas. And the way they judged it, they brought in some executives, some directors and stuff like that, and we presented all of our ideas, and we made little mock-ups, like we talked about earlier. We're capable of doing almost anything.
Mm-hmm.
We would make these little mock-ups,
Yeah.
and we had this, we presented them to all these people, and the directors and executives had to vote on
Okay.
what was the best.
And you guys built a full-size one, right?
We did.
Yeah,
We built
yeah.
a full size. We used a pickup truck box, and we put some of the things in it,
Mhm.
and videoed it, and showed them the stuff we had come up with. Well, lo and behold, our team won the competition. And we were up against teams from, Renaissance Center, Milford Proving Ground,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
Vehicle Engineering Center, and there again, it just showed the capability,
That your group had.
people that
Yeah.
were there,
Yep,
the
yep.
passion that we had.
They weren't cobbled.
things-
They weren't cobbling things together. Yeah.
No, it was
It
definitely,
was-
and, they had the ability to build stuff that worked, right?
Mhm.
That looked and felt like it would be in production.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
and I guess what I would say to wrap that up is, it's really cool that it came out of there. It looks very close to the original.
Mhm.
That team won the Boss Kettering Award, which is a huge
Wow.
award inside
Yeah.
the company.
Yeah.
And usually, I think the criteria has got to be something that's truly innovative, patent protected and things like that. But also, it has to be a financial success
Yeah.
to win that. And I remember when they won.
that's rare.
That's rare. And they won the Boss Kettering before it actually even went on sale, which was very unusual. And I remember I was kind of throwing a little shade on it. I was saying to some people, I'm like, this is ridiculous. And I actually spoke to a person from the truck group, and they do early orders, so they show the prototypes to the
Yeah.
dealers, and the dealers are ordering everything. And he said, that tailgate alone drove a 40% leap in the buyer. So the buyer is buying the base vehicle, and you have to go up one level to get that
To
tailgate.
get that tailgate.
They said 40% of the buyers went up.
40%.
40%.
That's
He's like,
huge.
yeah, that is a number that starts with a B. And so he's like, that thing deserves to win. And you look, it's everywhere. I mean, you look at all these trucks,
yeah.
and that's a
Oh,
big
yeah.
upsell.
Yep,
And
yep.
so it's been an incredible boon for the company,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it came out of the AVI shop.
Yeah.
So I just love
Yeah,
that story.
yeah. So.
So there's the start
And the
of
whole group
Mario.
can take credit for that.
Yes.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
really-
That's great. And you're a Mopar guy.
I'm a Mopar
So
guy.
so got a couple of hot rods.
I
You know, you
do,
can-
yeah, I've got some cars that I drive, some street hot rods.
Uh-huh.
I do a little bit of drag racing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And been kind of drag racing all my life.
So what's your best car?
My best car?
Yeah. Yeah.
I got a 41 Willys, that's actually Mopar powered, that I've been drag racing for the
Nice.
last 10 years. I'd race with the NDRL group.
Okay.
Which is a group of our side of the country
Uh-huh.
that does some nostalgia drag racing.
Mm-hmm. How quick is it?
The car's been 920, 145.
Okay.
I slow it down to run the heads-up class.
Okay.
there. 950 heads-up class. I've done pretty good in that
Uh-huh.
class from time to time. and
Yeah.
Kind of swoop in and take some of their money once in a while. I haven't run their whole series, but a couple times I go to a few races. and have
Cool.
fun.
And the company's leveraged Mario's skills. He was a crew chief on one of the Bonneville cars that we sent out
Which
there.
one? Which one?
The Cobalt.
The Cobalt,
Red and
okay.
white, I always called it the Go Fast Cobalt.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a vehicle, 2-liter, a 90mm turbocharged on methanol.
Uh-huh.
We took it to Bonneville. It had been to Bonneville a year or two previously, but unsuccessful.
Mm-hmm.
And then we spent some time with the car before we went out. We did some testing, and we took it there, I think, 2007.
Okay.
And we raised the record. The record when we got there was around 207 miles an hour
Wow.
for a front-wheel drive.
Mhm.
G-blown fuel-altered coupe is what
Okay.
it was, which is a 2-liter. So we made some runs with the thing, and we upped the record from 207 to 218.
Wow.
And then there was more in the car after that. And so we cranked the boost up basically in it. And we ultimately ended up setting the record at 246,
Wow.
I think 63 or something like that.
So a
The
couple
record
of
that
innovations
still
that
stands
happened
today.
there, you know, that car went wind tunnel and they went out to the desert proving grounds and did a bunch of, you know, drive offs with the thing, and it had a special push truck. So share a little about the push truck.
Yeah, so one of the things we recognized is that the faster you can get the car going in the start, the more terminal velocity.
Just like
and I'll explain. So the
61
Bonneville guys always talk about, what are you doing at the 2 1/4?
2 1/4.
2 1/4, there's a time zone between the 2 and the 2 1/4, and most of them will tell you whatever you're doing there will define what you're gonna do
Define
at
what
the
you
end.
do.
Because it's just, it is a drag race.
Right,
And
right.
so keep going.
So we had a Banks modified, full-size, GMC truck that was capable, I think,
I thought it
600.
was a Suburban, wasn't it? I thought it was,
No,
it was a pickup truck? Okay, I couldn't remember.
Yeah, it was a truck, and it had 650 to 700 horsepower it was
Wow.
capable of making, and so it helped us push the car off.
Yeah.
But they had like extra mufflers on it. It would, if people
Yeah.
would watch it pull
It
away,
was
they'd be like,
fine.
well, that thing seems to scoop, but you can't hear it, you know? And the whole bottom of it was mufflers, you know, and that thing hauled.
Yeah, by the time the car left the front of the
That's a
truck,
big
it was
deal.
up already around 80 miles an hour.
Yeah,
We hadn't pushed
yeah.
it very far.
Because
You know?
we were at Steve Watt's shop
Yep,
yesterday, where the
Speed Demon,
Speed
yep.
Demon is, and he was talking about even 10 feet or 15 feet difference of starting position would help the speed.
Yeah.
He said, because I remember a thing we did with Kenny a while back, and this was several years ago, and he said, if we had an extra mile, we could go 500. And he said, what, 100 feet?
Yeah.
If we had an extra 100 feet, we could go 500 miles.
So it is
Which-
really,
which just
it's really a
pushes the-
drag race. You don't think of it that way.
really
You
is a
got all this
drag
room
race.
out there,
Yeah.
but it
So
is a
so
drag
something
race.
like that was really innovative, and we were kind of surprised, frankly, that they haven't pushed that yet. So
Well, we
maybe
probably
they will.
screwed that up for everybody right now, but it's such a cool story.
Let the
because-
cat out of the bag.
Well, but again, you know, this is the kind of stuff that I wish GM and all the other manufacturers would document stuff in the moment and then save it for later, because there's so much really amazing ingenuity that's going on, and then build capability and quality, and you know, I understand it's a business that's built on secrecy, but to me, the people are what drive it, and the people, you know, we had Al on and then Mara now, and it's the people that do this great work, and if you can be recognized for the work you do,
Yeah.
that's just basic. You're gonna be more
Absolutely.
inspired
Yeah.
the next time. You're gonna do it better, faster, cheaper,
Yep.
because you believe it's meaningful work.
Right,
And so
right.
that was these guys know, that was my constant chant when I was in GM. I'm like, because I'm the kid in the candy store. I'm going,
Yeah.
this is the coolest thing ever.
Yeah.
And nobody's gonna see it but me.
Yeah, yeah.
And so that was hard. So tell us, I mean, you worked on a bunch of different projects. Was there one that was like incredibly challenging, but you got through it? I mean, one that you could think of, you're sitting in the middle of it going, man, there's no way.
It is so difficult to come up with the one. I mean, there's so many. Again, a 40-year career that I had
Wow,
there.
yeah.
I was so very fortunate to be a part of it, be part of the team and the people, and work with them. One of the things that I think I go back to, it's one I did earlier on in my career, active suspension. You know, we were doing active suspension in vehicles, and it was stuff that hadn't really been done in production vehicles ever before. They were doing a little bit in racing. I think Lotus did a little bit of it in the 80s. This was probably...
So we should define that. When you say active suspension, it's not like you're changing the particles in the
Shock absorber.
Shock absorber.
No.
This was actually a unit that there was no springs. correct?
Basically, right. So the springs are not in the vehicle. You have the hydraulic rams basically that take the place of the spring, and you're infinitely changing the spring rate in the vehicle as you're driving it down the road.
Wow.
So you're not compromising anymore. With most vehicles, you have to compromise with spring rates and shocks and stuff like that.
Sure.
Whether it's a performance-oriented ride handling or luxury, right? With the active suspension, you don't make those compromises anymore because
You
you
can
can
have it all.
infinitely adjust spring rates.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that got developed at the same time, we called it real-time dampening, which became, real-time dampening, fast shocks is what we call it.
Okay.
RTD. And then another evolution of that was the MR shocks that came later. So I was
Okay.
part of an advanced chassis systems early on in the career before we actually joined with the AVI group.
And that's probably the point about that. It's literally almost transparent to your end user how good the suspension is, for example, on a car, or the active things that are being applied.
Yeah, chassis
to
controls,
chassis
which is
controls
doing
and stuff.
throttle, brake and
Right.
ABS.
I mean,
and
it's
stability
transparent to the
control.
driver, and the driver tends to think, man, I really got a handle on this whole thing. Well, try it. Turn all that stuff off
Yeah.
as much as you can, and then try and drive that fast.
So
and
with-
you discover very quickly that it's a lot harder.
Well, and
That's
like
one
with
of the
chassis
things we
controls,
used
go
to
ahead.
do with our active cars when we'd have some of the rides out at Milford Proving Grounds. There's a R&H loop, they call it, ride handling loop, which has a bunch of different types of road conditions, right? There's spalled concrete, railroad track undulations, what was the other, chatter bumps and whatnot.
Right.
So
This
we
is
would-
funny, there's actually people that specialize in building bad concrete
Right.
and screwed up asphalt.
All they
Just
really
want you
need to do
know
is come out to Los Angeles, because it's all right here all the
So what
time.
we would do when we have some of the executives come out and ride the vehicles, because they were always interested how they're spending their money, right? We would put them in our active car first, the active suspension car, and send them around the ride handling loop, and they'd go drive it around for 15 or 20 minutes. They'd be making laps, right? And then they would come in and they go, wow, that was pretty good. It drives incredibly well, handles really good. And so over the chatter bumps is where it would really shine, because you lose wheel control over chatter bumps.
Right.
And the chatter bumps were around the corner, right?
Oh.
So it starts hammering the tire, and then you lose wheel control, and the thing starts sliding off the road, where the active car didn't.
Okay.
Then we would put them in the best base car that we had
Mm-hmm.
at that time with, and again, that's a compromise for the shock valve
Sure.
and the springs and stuff like that, and send them out. Well, they would try and make the same laps at the same speed.
At the same speed.
And damn near kill themselves as they slid off the road. They would come back in and sometimes holler at us, why did you do that to me? Why didn't you let me know that that thing was gonna, but it really sent the message home how good
Exactly.
it really was.
Hammer that really home. Yeah.
And that also, again, goes back to the ABI shop. They would build vehicles that almost always would go to Milford. Like people would put a cow on them and start driving them. And yet it was all one-off stuff
Right,
that just
right.
didn't exist in the
Exactly.
world. And that was the part that I was always I loved,
Impressed
right?
with,
You know,
right?
to see
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
And I want to talk about the fixturing that some of the guys came up with to be able to replicate the math data almost exactly.
Oh, right.
And so, and how you guys use that. Can you talk a bit about that?
So, yeah, you know, early on, we did fixturing where we would just, hold things here and there occasionally. If you were doing a frame or doing a body structure or something like that, and locate parts using our coordinate measurement machines and stuff like that. It was actually Al and Jim Ostrand Jr.
Yes.
got together and they came up with this pretty elaborate system, basically just laser cutting sections, if you will.
Okay.
But instead of the section of the part,
Okay.
section that you would lay it in, like,
Yeah.
you've seen how sometimes bodies are made and stuff like that.
Buck,
You would-
right.
Right, bucks.
Yeah.
And they would be tab and slot together,
Mm-hmm.
and they'd make these elaborate fixtures out of it, and they were fairly inexpensive to build and easy to make.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so then when you would actually make the components, they're dead on,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And very sturdy.
I've never seen anything like it. I just tell you that
Pretty
the
elaborate.
ability of that organization to take math data and then fabricate something that almost exactly replicated what they would have in production.
In production.
Was insane.
That's
And
difficult to do.
Because it's all these pieces that nest together.
Right,
And create
right.
this basically shape that they would replicate with
yeah.
the product.
So
So
Yeah.
it's really cool.
one of the
Yeah.
things that would happen, and like what Will's talking about there, is there would be analysis done on the structures in math data,
Mm-hmm.
right? So we had some,
Math data is what GM calls the 3D model.
Right.
Just so you know,
Okay.
that's their term for
so
it.
there were people that were capable of doing structural analysis, so they could predict what the, how the component frame rail
Mm-hmm.
lever would flex, and how badly it would flex or whatnot, once it was all assembled.
Also
and put together.
harmonics, all
Yeah,
kinds of different
right,
things.
structural analysis. And so one of the things we would do is after we would build the structure, we would actually do some testing on the actual structure that was built, whether it would be a frame,
see how
to see
close-
how closely it
Yeah.
correlated, and usually it was
Dead
within,
on.
yeah.
Wow.
Percentages were so small.
And I'm just telling you,
Yeah.
that is impressive.
That's really hard to do.
So
Yeah.
I'll finish with this. The
Okay.
thing about the ABI shop that was always amazing was people would bring them ridiculous things to do in insane timelines, and they would always get it done.
Yeah.
The ABI shop
Yeah.
would always do it, and it was one of these. It was actually I felt bad for them because they always knew that they would be able to pull it out,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
and so that
Pull off the
was
impossible.
We had such an incredible team, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Of engineers, designers,
Yeah,
and fabricators, and then,
And that's all stuff that no one knows about. That's all stuff that nobody sees because that's why you're here, right? So we can tell that story and we could do this another hour, but it's time to go. So thanks for coming out.
Thank you
Thanks
very
for
much
sharing
for
that
having me.
information with us,
Appreciate it.
Will.
Ah.
Oh man, dude, this is so
Always a
much fun.
pleasure,
We can
yes.
do this again. So if you like what we're doing here, subscribe, do all those good things. We want to thank the Peterson Museum for letting us hang out at this wonderful facility. And of course, our friends at arp-bolts.com. And if you like the stories we're telling you, keep doing it because we'll tell you more.